Hey, I'm so excited to be here today on our podcast with the Dr. Jen Thomas, and I'm so excited to have you here today, Dr. Thomas. You've actually been someone that I have been promoting your book for several years, and especially my daughter Mariah has been promoting your book on the five apology languages, and I'm just so excited to hear how this came to you, and then just how we can help families who are really wanting to live intentionally, and how they can be more intentional this year than they were last year. So, welcome to our show today, Dr. Thomas. It's awesome to have you today. So, hey, so how did you come to this? There are five apology languages. That just sounds so cool. Um, how did you come to that?
Well, thanks for having me on the show, Greg.
Yes.
And the concept actually developed in my own marriage. And what was happening was that I was apologizing to my husband. His name's JT. And he didn't think my apologies were very good. And,
I
uh,
love it.
and
I love
they
it.
say it's hard to live with a psychologist, but he's actually a financial professional.
Oh, great.
And and he was telling me that my apologies could use some help.
How
So
did that go? How did that go
how'd that go
over with
over?
you?
Um, well, probably like a lead balloon at first.
Come on, come on. I can
Yeah,
feel it. I can feel
yeah,
it.
exactly. But, since then I've thanked him for getting me to dig more deeply into the whole
Mm,
topic of apologies. And
man.
when we wrote the five apology languages, it was first titled The Five Languages of Apology, and now we've
Okay.
updated it and we've re-released it with the title When Sorry Isn't Enough.
Oh,
Um, and I asked JT if he wanted to be involved in the writing of the book since he's the one who caused me to develop the concept.
right.
And he said, "No, thanks. I'm going to stick with the money management, but you take that and see how many people you can help get unstuck in their relationships with that." And so
That's
that's
so
what I've
good.
been doing.
Oh my.
And I gave a TED talk on the concept
Oh.
a few years ago.
Mm. I want to
And
encourage all of our listeners to go to YouTube and type in uh, Dr. Jennifer Thomas and TED Talk, and it'll. I just been listening to it, and by the way, how cool! Your husband's in the financial services business. That's what I was in for 30 years. So
right,
great.
that's
Anyway,
your background as well.
sure.
Yeah, and he and I laugh about that. That there are some overlaps in my work as a psychologist and
Mm,
his, and trying to help people think about the psychology of money,
mm,
and
that's good.
recognize there's a growing field now in economics of looking at psychology, and that so
Mm,
many spending decisions are not rational, and so you need to look at what are the fears and the
mm, mm.
thoughts of scarcity that's behind
Oh,
all
that's
of
good.
that. So yeah, we have some interesting conversations around the dinner table with our two kids who are in college and also
Oh,
our
great.
middle schooler
Oh, great,
about
great.
about those topics. But back to how this developed,
Yeah.
I got curious about, well, JT, you were saying that my apology wasn't very good. In fact, he didn't even think it was an apology. Um, and what I had said was I was sorry.
Oh,
And
right.
so I asked him what he was looking to hear.
Mm,
And as you know from listening to my TED Talk,
right.
he knew right away. He wanted me to say I was wrong. And I was willing to say that. It's just that that's not my reflexive apology
Mm,
phrase. And so
mm,
I got
mm.
curious about, well, do we all have sort of a card that we play when it's time to apologize?
Wow,
And if so,
wow.
how many of those cards are there?
Hmm.
And then it also struck us, uh, both of us realized as we were talking with young couples in our church who were engaged and wanted to get
Right.
married, that it was similar to Gary Chapman's five love languages, in that you have this preference that you carry around, and you don't realize when the person you're in a relationship with wants something different. And I happen to know Gary Chapman through my work. And so after a few months, I took the idea to him and just said, have you ever thought about how people have apology preferences just like they have love language preferences?
Right.
And he said, honestly, no, I've never thought about that, but I can see how that would be true. And so why don't we take this to he has like a weekly evening class for relationship building. He said, why don't we take it to them? They're sort of his focus group, and we can spend the first 20 minutes on this. And what happened was we spent the whole hour and a half on it because they had so many questions and comments. And
I can imagine.
Wow. We realized this is kind of a sticky concept that people wanted to dig into. Yeah. And I know from my own life how important apologies are. You know, you don't get to be 50 years old or, you know, people listening maybe much older or younger without having some scars on you.
Yeah, yeah.
And boy, when you've offered an apology and it's been rejected, or when someone just cuts you off, I've had situations where people have cut me off and they won't even let me apologize. Wow. And it feels like emotional road rash. That's what the bicyclists call it when you fall, you know. And it's very distracting. It's hard to turn back and focus on your work or other relationships when you've got a relationship where the wheels have come off. And so that has been my passion, and one that Gary Chapman has joined me with, is helping people to be able to resolve the offenses that inevitably crop up. And so what he told me as our book, When Sorry Isn't Enough, was released is, Jennifer, I really see the love languages and the apology languages as being the two essentials for healthy relationships. And so as I go forward for the rest of my career, I'm going to be talking about both of these, because you've got to have the love languages to keep your love tank full, but you've also got to have the apology languages in order to deal with those offenses.
So good. So good. You know, Jennifer, one of the things that we talk about at Family ID is the importance of the sibling relationship, and how the sibling relationship is actually a training ground for marriage. And so how, you know, now that you have studied this and begin to get this deep revelation on how important apology is, oh my gosh, you know, just scripturally, just hitting me like a ton of bricks right now, that how many scriptures there are that if we don't forgive, then he cannot forgive us. And the Lord's Prayer, you know, forgive me all of my debts as I forgive those who trespasses, those trespasses or debts, those who are indebted to me, and so on. I mean, boy, the Bible's packed with it, and yet it's so vague as to how do you actually do it. So if you were talking with a couple of young children in the home, and they just one of them just, you know, walloped the other one, and we would normally say, uneducated, untrained as parents, on how do we get these kids to ask for forgiveness, and how do we get them to apologize? What do we normally say, and then what do we need to say?
Right.
Or
Greg, I get that. Yeah, I get that question a lot. And what parents want to know is, how do I get them to say it and mean it? Because they don't.
Ooh, come on. Yes.
Right? So I've narrowed it down to a couple of things. What we did with our kids, and I can't say, you know, I'm the world expert on this, but what we did was we'd put them in timeout and give them a cooling off period. But it wasn't just time served. In order to get out, they had to have a conversation with us and or the person who they offended before they could get out.
Ooh, this is good. This is good. Go.
All right. So we'd go in for it's kind of like an exit interview in the corporate world, right? Except they want to exit from timeout. And so I had a couple of questions. One, what rule did you break? And two, what's wrong with what you did? Which is basically, why do we have that rule? So if the offense was hitting someone, they'd say, well, I broke the rule of not hitting someone or not hitting my sister. And then why do we have that rule? Or what's wrong with hitting people? And then I'm looking for something like, well, it could hurt them. And it doesn't feel good to be hurt. And I don't want to hurt her and drive her away from me. I want to be in relationship with her is basically where we want to get as they grow. But, early on, you don't get that kind of stuff. You get, well, I shouldn't do that because I'm going to get in trouble, or I'm not going to be able to get on my gaming system if I do that. So it's baby steps as they grow.
Yeah, sure.
Another tool that I've used is some kids who are maybe the really more strong-willed kids, they're not even going to be ready to talk about it that day. And so with some of mine, I would let them write out their apology and slip it under my door. And then I would let them know if that was adequate or not. So writing out the apology would look like writing out what they did wrong and what was wrong about it. And then I save those up in a file. I'm a scrapbooker, so I would put the date and the kid's age, and that was just fine with me because that's fun material to look
Oh my
at.
goodness, yes, I love it. I love it. I love it. Oh my gosh, that sounds like really intentional. That sounds like ID, intentional direction. Okay. And so, would you give us the 5 apology languages?
Yes. So the first 2 I've touched on. They're what I tend to say, which is I'm sorry, and
Okay.
what JT wanted to hear, which is I was wrong. So these are both focused on the past. We're talking about what went wrong, and you want to be specific in acknowledging it. You don't want to use general terms like what
Right.
happened, right? That goes right
Right.
through us. We know, well, they're not really taking responsibility. And when we want to hear someone say, I was wrong, we don't want any excuses. We want
Right.
them to say specifically what they did wrong or what
I
they're
see.
sorry for.
Ooh.
Then I think of them as past, present, and future. So moving to the present, our
Okay.
third apology language is making amends, which is making the person whole again in the present. And there's a financial tie-in here as well.
Okay.
If I'm
Okay.
making you whole, I want to be able to show on the balance sheet that I'm leaving you in as good a condition as you were before I messed up. And we
Okay.
can do this by paying you money or by buying a replacement. Or it could be, if it's not a financial transaction, it might be that I'm going to make amends by volunteering my time. That's another
Okay.
resource that we
Okay.
have. But I'm
Right.
showing that I'm going to kind of put my money where my mouth is, and I'm going to put some action into making things up to you.
Okay. So give me an example of where is that the kind of apology you would give if you broke something that was somebody else's, or is that when you would use that, or do you use it even when there's nothing's been broken, but you can just pay them $5 to forgive me?
Yeah, well, it wouldn't be quite that direct, but
Okay.
it might be. I really want to underscore how sorry I am that I offended you, and so I'd like to take you out for coffee, and I'm buying, or take
Okay.
you
I
out to
see. I
dinner,
see.
and I'm buying.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
I see.
and so, with all of these apology languages, what we say is they do build on each other.
Okay.
And so you might notice that you like several of them, just like the love languages. Most of us are like, yeah, bring it on, give them all to me, right? But your primary language is going to be the one that when they leave it out, you're left thinking, and give me something else here.
Okay. Okay.
And so as people listen, if they're taking notes, I want them to make note of what might they sometimes leave out that the other person is waiting for. And you'll hear them complain back to you like JT did to me, where they'll say, like, let me move on to the fourth apology language, and I'll give an
Okay.
example
Okay.
here. So
Okay.
our
Good.
fourth
Good.
one, we've called genuinely repenting. But as we move into the workplace and we're moving away from religious language, we're now calling it revising the plan. And so this one is about letting the person know what you're going to change so that it can't happen again. And if this is someone's primary apology language, you can tell them how sorry you are and how wrong you were, and that you're going to replace maybe if you had a typo in a brochure, you're going to say, well, I'll cover that out of my paycheck. I'm going to redo that brochure. But this person is waiting to hear you say, but are you going to use spell check next time? Or are you going to run it by me? They're all about next time, and they're moving towards the future. They want to head it off. So there's
Good.
not waste, and so there's not unnecessary frustration
Right.
for all parties.
Right. Right.
And then our fifth and final apology language, we found as we interviewed people about what they really want to hear when someone has a mea culpa. And this was our least common, and it is actually a question. It's, will you please forgive me?
Oh.
And what we found is that some people's parents or teachers required that of them. And so they grow up, and to them, that's the period at the end of an apology. And if you don't do that, you've kind of left them hanging.
Okay. Okay.
But I didn't have that in my script, and so I can't imagine how many people I left waiting for something more
Right.
until we did the research and wrote the book. And now
Wow.
we're letting other people know,
Hmm.
especially if you're apologizing for something that was a significant error that you made, or if it's repeated, you're going to want to include that request for forgiveness, because
So
it
good.
may be that that is the one thing that's really going to show them how sincere you are.
That's so good. You know, I tell this story at all of our family ID workshops, and that's that my father and mother went to this workshop when they were when I was around 10 years old. I have an older sister that's less than a year older than me, and then I have two younger brothers that are 2 years younger than me. My brother Philip is 2 years younger, and my brother Nathan is 2 years younger than him. So my parents got us all in a huddle after they got back from this week-long workshop that they went to. And every evening they went each night, and then they went all day Friday, all day Saturday. And they came home, and my dad got us in a huddle in the living room. And I can see it like it was yesterday. And he said, he started crying, and I'd never seen my dad really cry. And then it went into like boo-hooing, you know. Oh my gosh. I'm going, oh, what in the world? There's something terrible here happening. And
Wow.
so he says, just chokes it out. I want to ask you to please forgive me for the times that I've hurt you in the past, the things I disciplined you in anger, the things I've done to hurt your mom. And he just apologized and asked for forgiveness to every one of us, you know. And I remember thinking, oh, absolutely. Should I forgive you, Dad? Just please stop crying, you know. And as I grew up and I look back on that, I don't know how it happened. I don't know what happened, except I forgave my dad of all the past, all the present, and all the future in that 1 minute.
Amazing.
Now, you know, of course, I asked this question to everybody. I said, so do you think my dad disciplined me in anger after that? What do you think the answer is?
Well, I would guess maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's a human. Didn't do it very often. I mean, it was like a bunch less than it had ever been before. But
All right.
of course, he's a human. Okay, you know what? And when I initially got over that, the initial being mad at him, I remember thinking, I forgive him. I forgive that guy. That wasn't even my real dad. That wasn't my real dad who just, you know, said something that just hurt me, you know, or whatever. That wasn't him. My real dad was that guy that was bawling that day in our living room. And then when I went off to college, I remember my friends wanted to go party and whatever, and I said, I don't want to go. And of course, I didn't tell them. The reason I didn't want to go is I didn't want to hurt that guy that was bawling that day in our living room. For whatever reason, I tied the rest of my life, even to this day, he's passed away, I still tie my relationship to my dad in that 1 minute. And I've tried to analyze that. I've tried to go, okay, what in the world? How could that happen? And
Mm,
so this is what I came with, and I can't wait to ask you if you have run into this before. But here's what I think happened. I think I was able to forgive my dad emotionally because I felt like he was hurting as bad as he had hurt me over how he had hurt me. And thus,
mhm.
I was able to forgive him mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I was able to forgive him all the way through. And of course, it happened when I was 10. I don't know. I wasn't, my intellect wasn't grown enough to even know on what all levels I was, it happened. But that has helped me so much in my asking for forgiveness. But of course, I didn't know all these awesome five five levels of apology language, and this is so exciting to me. And then
Mm.
the second thing that of what you said was when I asked my siblings to forgive me. I was so convicted over how I had treated my siblings growing up as an older brother. Yeah, go ahead.
And that's really interesting because I was going to say your dad modeled apologizing to you. And I love that he did that. And I think you're
Amen.
exactly right
Okay,
about
good, good,
yeah,
good.
that you could see his pain and it matched your pain. And so
Hmm.
it's like you got a match set, you set them aside.
Oh, good. That's a good
Yes.
word. Thank you, thank you.
And then he modeled it and you carried it on and you used it, which is what we hope people will do. And
Uh-huh.
so, yeah, I'd love to hear your story about you and your siblings.
Okay, so the Lord just really gave me this revelation that if we look at the Bible, the first murder in Scripture was between two brothers, and
Hmm.
then Ishmael and Isaac and their relationship, and how the enemy just owns all unresolved sibling conflict. He owns it.
Hmm.
It's his. It's been his greatest tool for just one of his greatest tools for destruction. You know, I mean, look at the generations of Ishmael and Isaac's relationship, Jacob and Esau, um, Leah and Rachel, David and his brothers, Joseph and his brothers, on and on and on. I mean, look what percentage of the Bible is written about unresolved sibling conflict, And
Hmm.
so that revelation was so powerful to me that I felt like I have really got to, I want to see a healing happen in the
Hmm.
relationship with my siblings. So um,
Good.
I, I wrote them in college after I'd left home. I started really thinking about, oh my gosh, I don't see my brothers anymore. I don't talk to them very much. And it's just, I start feeling this conviction about, you know what, I need to apologize for how I had hurt them in the past. So I wrote them an apology. And then I met with my brother, um, Philip, and I said, Philip, I want to ask you to please forgive me for all the things that did to hurt you growing up. And man, I remember one time I did this and I did that. And he goes, Greg, you don't need my forgiveness. I don't, we didn't even know what we were doing. We were, so,
Hmm.
you don't need my, I, I don't have any, I don't hold anything against you. And I said, well, Philip, it would just mean everything to me if you just said the words, I forgive you. Would you
Hmm.
do that? He goes, I forgive you. Like he didn't even mean it. But for whatever reason, I feel like something happened when he
Hmm.
said that.
Okay.
Something happened. And so
Hmm.
you might be able to tell me what happens.
Well, it's a release that we
Okay,
want.
I see.
Yes, it's a freedom.
Uh,
Absolutely. And
uh,
it's so important,
that's good.
when we ask for that and you
That's
let him
good.
know exactly what you needed and you gave him the gift of an apology, which is amazing and
Good.
so healing when you can do that. And I love that you wrote a letter. That's one of my pieces of advice that
Is
I
it?
give people is write a letter and keep a copy of it for
Mm,
yourself so you can remember what you've said and that you've
yes.
offered and you've tried because sometimes they're not received. And that way you don't end up repeating yourself over and over.
Right.
Another thing I want to point to,
Yeah.
you brought up the scriptures and how much, God wants us to be reconciled one to another and to love each other. And as we've studied the scriptures, we found something interesting, and that is that in the Bible, the burden for making things right is on the offender.
Right.
If you look at like the Matthew 5, where it talks about giving your offering, and if you're there and you realize that someone has something against you, go and make it right. And you see, that's not our human nature. If I'm thinking about someone when I'm at the altar, it's how they hurt me. So this is a tall order.
I've never seen that. I've never realized that.
Okay. So we're going against our human nature, and we're not to have be up there and have a pity party, but to think about more like you did with your brother. Who do I need to go to and try to make things right? How can I clear my conscience? And if they're bothered by this, help them to feel better as well.
Wow.
And another thing we looked for is, where in the Bible are we told to forgive everybody absolutely? And we actually ran into a brick wall on this, and we were very surprised. Wow. And Gary Chapman himself, he's a Baptist pastor, and he said, I'm not finding where we're told to forgive an unrepentant person. Wow. And so he said, I think when we do that, it's called forbearance. Oh. And that is not being bitter and standing ready to forgive them.
Oh, okay.
And he said that's what Jesus did on the cross.
Wow, this is a complete revelation right here.
Right there. Boom.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, Gary taught this stuff to me. He said, Jesus didn't forgive the people who crucified him right then. He said, Father, you forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. And so he's giving that recommendation, and that is forbearance, if you or your listeners want to look that up. And the reason this is so important is I feel like we have, in the Christian church, we have like forgiveness police who are on victims to forgive. And I want to call them off, and I want the any pressure that's applied to be on, are they getting good apologies? Did they get their apology language met? Or are they getting this, you're too sensitive. Right. It's not that big a deal. Why can't you move on? Those poor souls need a minute. They need time sometimes. If you ask that question, our fifth apology language, will you please forgive me? What we say is, don't require the answer right then, right? Tell them, I know I've hurt your trust. And so you don't need to answer me now, but watch me. I'm going to work to rebuild your trust.
Wow. I have a group. I'm very, very close to this group that has created this ministry called Fight Club. And it's men and women who are fighting for their marriage, fighting for their relationship with their children. And these are people who are in the middle of separation or divorce, and of course they come to Fight Club because they are absolutely broken. They'll do anything to get restoration in their relationship. But some of them have apologized to their spouse, and they, of course, probably did it wrong. They told them, I'd been having an affair. I've had one now for whatever, and I've been pornography, and then I've been Okay, so primarily the men that are in that category, and they go, she didn't forgive me, or she says she forgives me, but she wants to have nothing to do with me forever. Well, did she really forgive me, or and so on, and so. What do you say to this? You've probably seen it many times, that people are going to be asking you because your advice, because I just asked for forgiveness, and man, it did nothing. It was terrible. So what happens?
Right. What do you do when you feel like you've tried everything?
Uh,
I remember from back when I was in driver's education class,
yeah.
they would say if you're stuck in a ditch, you don't just want to spin your wheels because you're going to get dug in more deeply. You got to try put in reverse, then forward. You got to rock your way out of there.
I
And
see.
so that is my hope for your listeners is if they
Yes.
feel like they tried everything, that maybe our 5 apology languages can be 5 ways that they can put it in reverse,
Uh,
that they can go back and
mm,
say, I realized
that's good.
maybe I didn't get specific enough about
Mm,
what I'm sorry for and what I
right.
did wrong, and maybe I could make more amends to you.
Right. Right.
What would be helpful for me to do? And don't put it all on them. I would actually offer like, and I made a list of 10 things I would like to do that might be helpful to you. And
Yeah.
this may play in more like if there are children involved, because every
Right.
mom
Right.
needs help. Like
Mm,
I could take them at these times. If you trust me, I could,
I see.
give you a weekend off. So it's not
I
pressuring
see.
her to spend time with him, but
Mm,
showing that heart of
see.
service.
That's so good. That's so good. Oh man, I need all of these guys that are in this fight club to meet you and talk to you. No, I know that's
Sounds like
impossible.
a great club. Yeah, I have a heart for people who are estranged from their grandchildren. I hear
Yeah.
too often about people who cannot see their grandchildren
Mm,
because of this
mm,
brokenness with their own
right.
children, and it
Right.
just makes me want to weep.
Ah, that's so
And
good.
so
That's so good, Jim.
it too often it comes out of divorce,
Yes.
in my
Yes.
experience.
Mm,
And there's a syndrome called parental alienation syndrome that I refer people to. They can read about. It's a real thing,
ah,
and it's having an effect on multiple
right.
generations. And I
Right.
know, Greg, that's your passion is
Mm,
for our
yes.
generations to be healed.
Oh, amen. 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 That is so good, Jen. I feel like God has, man, this is such a monumental um, facet of relationships and of family and of multi-generational view. And man, this is so important that families have access to this powerful revelation that is on so many levels. In fact, I think I just now remembered what triggered for me to ask forgiveness from my siblings, and it
Hmm.
was I went to the same seminar that my parents went to when I was 10. I went to that seminar when I was 18, and that at that seminar they said, we want you to make a list of people you've offended in the past and you've never asked them to forgive you. And so of
Uh-huh.
course I put down my brother, I put down my sister, I put down these different people. And he said, now if you're embarrassed to write their name because somebody might look over your shoulder and see who you wrote, just put their initials on your paper. So I'm putting initials on my paper of people that I have offended and I have never. And now that I've heard that at AA, part of the one of the 12 steps is to make a
Right.
list of everyone you've offended. Oh my gosh, what a biblical concept, you know. And then making an amends to the greatest extent that you can make amends to. I mean, think about how many of your love language, apology languages have been covered in AA, you know,
Exactly.
unbeknownst, right? Um,
Right. And as they say, all truth is God's truth.
oh,
So we do see these
yeah,
things coming up again and again.
right.
And I love that you were at a conference where they did that
Oh,
exercise.
it
What
was.
if everyone took 5 minutes now and sat down and wrote that list?
Man, wow, what a beautiful. And then read the book, read your book. How to say you're sorry? What's
The
it
new
say?
title is When Sorry Isn't Enough.
Okay,
And I also have some free resources on my website, which is drjenthomas.com. And the
okay.
doctor is spelled DRJEN Thomas.com.
Oh, perfect. In fact, we're gonna promo your book with this video. Okay, so your picture and the picture of your book are going to be on the icon that people will click on, so that they can
Wonderful.
connect with you. And oh my goodness, are you still doing clinical work today?
I'm shifting to where I'm doing coaching and
Okay.
I'm offering some new things. I think we need to be less sedentary, so I'm offering walking telephone coaching to
Wow.
people.
Oh, come on.
And I
This is
also
great.
found I didn't like having to cut off clients in mid-topic. And because I'm an author, I
Yeah,
have a very flexible schedule. So I'm
great.
flipping the time management. I'm selling my time in blocks of 5 hours or more. And
Okay.
I'm letting clients decide how long they want to talk to me on the
Wow.
telephone.
Okay. Okay. Great. Oh boy, that's awesome. Well, I'm definitely gonna call you and talk with you about that because Family ID have so many families that are that we have relationship with, and so many of them. There are those that I need to connect you with that you could become a powerful coaching consultant. One of the things we realize that families need is a village of advisors, and
Mhm.
we are helping them to determine who needs to be at the seats at the table of this village of advisors. And oh my goodness, you're going to be such a power. I'm so glad you're doing that, and we would definitely like to fill up your schedule if at all possible.
Well, thank you. I've got other coaches in the wings so
Oh,
that we
good,
can meet the
good,
need. And the
good.
final direction I'm moving is we want to take this to the workplace. So we're offering the same package
Mm,
that
mm, mm.
CEOs can offer to their
Yeah.
managers,
Oh,
so
that's
that
great.
everybody has the support they need, especially as we continue to come through this pandemic
Yes,
and the
yes,
changes that
yes.
are coming with our
Oh,
work
that's
being
great.
remote. And
Good, good,
do I
good.
need to go back to the office? And I don't want to go back to the office. And just holding hands as people adjust to all that life
Oh,
is
that's so
throwing
great.
us.
That's so great. Well, thank you. Oh my goodness, I have so much more that I know the revelation that you've received, and the
Mhm.
different groups that we, the couples who, um, we've had so many of those couples who are trying to restore their marriage, restore their relationship. Um, One of the questions I wanted to ask you was, the how important it is that we have boundaries, and I've had people come to me and say, Greg, I've got this wonderful Christian son-in-law or daughter-in-law or parent or, my spouse's parents, and they're wonderful people, but they have set up a boundary now that they're not going to let me, um, or my daughter-in-law has set up a boundary, and she says,
Mhm.
I'm not going to let you spend time with my grandchildren. And you're going, now, for whatever reason, that doesn't feel like a good, godly, kind, loving boundary, right? I mean, you could see that boundary as absolute evidence that they have not forgiven me. Am I right?
Yeah, it's a complex question because as the one who the boundary is set against, it feels unforgiving,
Oh,
unkind,
yeah.
unloving, unfair,
Oh,
and horrible for the kids as well as the
right,
grandparents.
right.
And then I've also met with these adult children who set the boundaries, and they'll
Mm,
too often they'll say, I find the grandparents to be controlling,
mm,
and I don't
right,
want my children to be exposed to them. They have this whole, it's sadly, it's like the political divide we're in right now,
right, right.
where the other group is completely and unfairly maligned.
Uh,
And there's a concept of a catastrophic shift that is what has happened and caused that divide.
I see.
And it's complex and long-term work to be able
I see.
to unwind that catastrophic shift once it happens.
I see.
And I do have a lot of empathy for both sides
I
and
gotcha.
for the mess that people
Right,
find
right,
themselves
right.
in.
Well, there are in this sibling relationship. Um, I have a very close friend who has a sibling that they have had to set up boundaries between that sibling and their the nieces and the nephews of that sibling, and because there was something that sibling said and did that really hurt one of the nieces, and um, she because of that the his niece just says, I don't want to be around my aunt, and I don't I'm afraid to be around her because I don't want her to blow up at me, whatever. So So this, of course, I'm thinking, hey, you need to kind of settle up a little boundary around that and so forth. Well, now the aunt feels like, because of the boundary, you haven't forgiven me. All of your apologies are fake. We have forgiven you. You are forgiven. You are, but So how do you navigate that? That was my advice to them was I had no idea what to do.
Right. Well, yeah, it's a very complex situation,
Okay.
but we got some help when we realized Gary Chapman's point from Scripture is that we should not be the apology police, and we should not be telling people it's time to move on. You've got to forgive them. You've got to get rid of this boundary, or else you're
Right.
not a good Christian.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's out the window, actually, because what we want to say is, I want to be loving towards you, and so I will respect your boundary, and I will love you through that, and I will earn back your trust. How can I do that?
Mm.
And so the process is giving them an apology that speaks to them, so it's in their
Okay.
apology
Okay.
language,
Okay.
and rebuilding their trust if they're willing to let you try that,
I see.
and not rushing the process and not calling them a bad Christian
Right. Right.
if it's taking some time, or if they're questioning your sincerity. They have a right to do that.
Oh, that's good. That's so good. All right. Okay. I'm going to call you and get in one of your 5-hour sessions.
Awesome.
Okay. Thank you.
All right,
Oh, this has
Greg.
been
Great to
so good.
talk
Hey,
with
would you tell our audience again how they can contact you? And I want to encourage every one of our audience members to get your book. So, guys, please go on. Is your book on audio as well?
Yes. When Sorry Isn't Enough is at all the major bookstores,
Okay.
and it's on audio and ebook, which has
Right.
been very popular this year, as well as the
Okay.
paperback version.
Good.
And my website is drjenthomas.com. And if people want to email me about my coaching packages, they can put coaching in the subject line of an email. And my
Okay.
email is just Jen, Jen, at drjenthomas.com.
Great. Oh, great. Hey, everyone, I want to encourage you to reach out to Dr. Jen Thomas and to engage with her and to, oh man, I'm telling you, the wealth of knowledge and revelation that the Lord has revealed to her on this subject is so powerful. Thank you so much, Jen, for being with us today. What a blessing. And I look forward to us talking more in the future. I would love to even ask you in the future to shoot some little 5-minute videos that would address these different groups. Anyway, you may already have some of those, but if you do, I want to get them. Anyway, thank you. God
Good.
bless you. Have a great day.
My pleasure. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.